A warm welcome to another edition of the Magpie Circle podcast. And I can see I'm going to have problems today. Not one, but three. And we want to kind of shine the light on what it was like to be a Notts County apprentice, YT, call them what you will. And we've got three alumni from the late 80s, the early 1990s. All made first team appearances. Except the bottom right-hand guy who made naught.
See, Coxie made a few. I'm top left on mine.
But the guy that's just spoken is a legend at Walsall. They've got to have one or two, haven't they? He's a legend. So let's go through the people today. So James Walker, Notts County appearances 0. Walsall, 984.
That's about right.
Paul Cox, who, let's be honest, he's got a team out of the National League and we need one of them at the minute. We need one of them. He knows how to do it. So Paul Cox, welcome. And top left, the guy we're all on this together is Paul Sherlock, who played for Notts and for Mansfield. I'm connected with him in LinkedIn. He's 3 hours ahead of us. He's out in Doha. And because he's 3 hours ahead of us, that explains why he's already put his Christmas tree up. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Let's shine a light on what it was like to be a Notts apprentice, or YT, whatever the correct terminology is. Now, this is a guy a few years before any of you were apprentices at Notts. Your starter for 10, fingers on buzzers. Who said this? I had 6 or 7 games one season with Notts County as a schoolboy. But they threw me out because they thought I wasn't good enough. In football, you need to be in the right place at the right time. Come on.
Can't help you, Paul. Quiz is not my things.
Whack, you are going to kick yourself.
Seriously.
You genuinely, you will. This guy went on to make more league appearances for one club than you did for Walsall.
I'm going that.
They were a bit better than Walsall, to be fair.
Notts County. What sort of year?
We're talking 64. 64, 65.
I'm a spring chicken, Paul. Yeah, I'm a spring chicken, mate.
You don't look it.
Thanks.
No. Okay, I'll give you another clue, because it's hard, to be fair. I wouldn't have got this.
I won't get that.
You know when you used to live in that Nottinghamshire property hotspot of Sutton, Whack?
God's country, yeah.
Yeah, and all of you being Nottingham boys, you'd all get on the train, I bet, when you were little, to go to an East Coast resort. Where does everyone in Nottingham go for a day trip to in the summer?
Vegas.
Right, okay.
Vegas.
This So this guy was born in Skegness.
Oh, is it Sir Ray? Is it Ray Clements?
It is.
Ah, rest in peace. What a hero.
Did you know that, eh?
I didn't know. Do you know what? I did. You're right. I did know this. I was looking at, obviously, with everything that's just gone off lately. I mean, what a lovely fella and such a sad loss. You know, I managed to meet him a few times, and I met him when I just moved to West Ham. Actually, he was such a humble guy, down to earth. It was at my boy's sports day of all places. His granddaughter was in there, and he introduced himself and said, "Oh, nice to," you know what I mean? I was like, "That's Ray Clements." Oh my God, he's a hero. So it was amazing, like, and what he achieved in the game was incredible. So seeing all the things lately that's come out about it, which have been such fitting tributes, I think, to him. It's been amazing to watch. But I did see that he started at Notts County and lived in Skeggy.
Yeah, I mean, so you can imagine driving in and out with his parents from Skegness on the A52, and he played half a dozen or so games as a schoolboy. Like, he played for reserves. Was Brian Bates involved with the youth academy setup when you guys were there or not? No. Brian played in the same team. Brian played in the same team and remembers him, and he was a young kid, found it difficult. Notts kicked him out, and he went to Scunthorpe.
See, happens to the best of us, that.
The rest is the same history. But, hey, it's quite poignant, isn't it? Because, you know, Ray Clements as a 16-year-old, he's kicked out by Notts County because he's not good enough. Clearly, he isn't going to feel great about himself and his chances of making professional football. So, guys, talk to us about what it's like as an apprentice at Notts. You all grew up in Nottingham. Shirls, you start off because you come from the posh bit, according to Wack.
Yeah, I've come from good stock. I guess because I started as a schoolboy, and when we used to do those Monday night School of Excellence sessions with Mick Walker, and I think Jimmy Cyril used to make like a guest appearance, and sometimes we do them on a Monday at the back of the car park, you know, at the back of the old stand. So that's how it all started. And I remember getting picked up. I used to go to Hucknall National, and I have to leave school a little bit early, get a lift with a mate to get to training for 5 o'clock or whatever. So that was the start of it all. And then I remember I remember the first opportunity where Mick Walker had seen me play or whatever, and then I got asked to sign. It was then schoolboy. I think it's called schoolboy forms. And the VIP treatment that I got was in one of the boxes, and was watching some reserve team game on a Tuesday night. It could have been against Scunthorpe or something like that. So I think the family were invited, and that was me being sort of wooed into signing. But then actually, you know, becoming a YTS. I mean, I still look back now on it as the best days that I had. And you know, like the values that I think the traits that we have now as individuals, those character traits are developed from those 2-3 years that we had as a group of lads, you know, together. You know, resilience, you know, humility, laughter, all those sorts of things that I look back on now. And I think I speak to the others, but I take those characteristics into my, you know, proper job in the end that I had to get. You know, and I talk about that a lot, you know, in the job that I'm in now. You know, how I look back on disappointments and you know, bouncing back from failures and so on and so forth. But yeah, the group of lads that we particularly had, because we were all in different year groups. I was the youngest. Wack was one above me, and then Cutsy was one above Wack. So we all played in different year groups, although we were all part of the same sort of group. But sharing a dressing room as a YTS lad, sharing a dressing room with all these guys, you know, you can imagine, you know, some of the antics that went on. And as a fresh-faced lad from, like you say, from Ravenshead, you know, some of the antics and some of the things that went on were like unbelievable. But no, good days, Paul.
Coxie, so you're kind of the elder statesman, and I use the phrase lightly, of these three here. So how did you get involved in Notts? How were you picked up?
I started off at Forest, believe it or not. I know there's a bit of a history, yeah. And it was my great granddad who was staunch season ticket holder at Notts, and basically told me I wasn't going to sign. So sort of came across.
Is that right? Seriously, your granddad wouldn't have it?
It was my great granddad. Yeah, I was at Forest from a kid all the way through, and I think Slade was Slade was he had something to do with the schoolboys and etc. I started off as a centre forward, and Slade put me back to being a centre back, and then sort of got me in the back door. I was getting called out of school and playing, you know, the old A-team games on Saturday mornings when it was any age group, and yeah, that's it. Just went from there. It's I agree with Shirls that when I look back, it's probably my best years ever. You know, as just as a human being, and you know the things you had to learn, and I mean, people look at coaching now, and I wonder if the two lads would agree with me. But some of the methods that we went through probably would raise a few eyebrows now, and some of the things we
probably get arrested.
Yeah, I mean, look at it back, wasn't it? If you look at some of the stuff that we did. But we had to grow up, Paul, really quickly. We had to grow up. You had to toughen up. It was, but I loved it. I loved it. It was when I look back at the time we had. It just makes you, you know, the person, you know, that you are today. And like I agree with Shirls, the morals, ethics that, and it was, you know, I mean, when we talk about the coaching, just the morals and ethics that were installed into you. I'll give you an example. I came in as a schoolboy. I got called in through the summer, and that was when Mick was there. Paul Hart was, I think, reserve team coach player, and I had an earring in one ear and like a hood in the other, and I had a love bite on the side of my neck. And I don't know if you two remember, but the old dressing rooms. We walked in down the tunnel, and we turned right now, and Harty was sat there in the referee's room. And as I walked by, he saw the earring in my ear, and sort of like just said, "Get in here." And as I got in there, he basically pinned me up by my throat and started tugging on the loop in my ear, and basically saying to me, "What's that in your ear?" Well, it was a little bit more robust than that. At which point I had tears in my eyes. I was a schoolboy at the time. I wasn't even an apprentice. And then he seemed to see the little bit of a love bite on the side of my neck. And there was a few harsh words, and he dropped me down, sort of pushed me out and warned me that if I came into, the next day with earrings in, he'd rip them out himself. I'll tell you what, I quickly learned that discipline, morals and ethics, and so, having an understanding of what it would take to be a professional footballer, I grew up really, really quickly. But yeah, it was, people. I think people complain about it now. Some of the youngsters. But for me, it was the making of what I thought I became. Just that desire. We weren't allowed on the first team pitch, were we? You weren't allowed nowhere near it, apart from the gravel track where, we'd run if something, the kit weren't packed. Or, I can remember we went to Tottenham, didn't we, when Neil was at the club, to pull the shorts in, and Mick came in Monday morning, and oh wow! You remember it was at the 5-5-5 we did, the 5 laps in 60 seconds, 5 half laps. Yeah. Lads were turning green in the morning. Lads were just like, just keeling over, yeah. I really agree with you, Shields. I just think it was great times for me, and even the old. I remember we got brought in having to paint that, all the crash barriers and stuff like that. It was 9 out of 10 times we'd end up in the dressing rooms, and we'd have black paint all over us, where lads had just abused each other a little bit. It was fun. It was fun, Mike, wasn't it?
That was brilliant. It was. Can you remember while I want it? Can you remember the car park up the top where the 5-a-sides used to be underneath? And Mick Walker at the end of the season got us. We had to weed it all out, and we thought they were going to do something nice with it and all that. We came back the next year, they concreted it all. Yeah. I'm like, come on, mate, that's 2 weeks of my life I'll never get back.
It was brilliant. I mean, some of the things we did, like I say, you think a lot of people in society would probably raise their eyebrows now, but I loved it. I think it makes you a little bit more resilient. And I look back with really, really fond memories.
Love the story, Coxie, about your great granddad in Notts County. Now, Whack, you were from Sutton, and now I'm told by one of the lads who's already dobbed you in, you was a Stags fan.
Still am, ish. Well, I used to have a season ticket for Forest.
Not even worse.
I know it's even worse, but that was for one reason. That was to watch Shilton. That was when Shilton was at his pomp there, and it was before I started playing regularly on a Saturday, so I'd be like 6, 7, 8, something around there. And I had the season ticket then for a couple of years, just to solely go and watch Shilts every week. It was incredible to watch him. It was amazing. So when I went to Notts, it was
You're digging yourself an hole. You're digging yourself an hole, Whack, right? Who was the best goalkeeper? Coxie, Shilts or Radi Avramovic? He pushed him a bit closer. Hey, Radi is an hero for Notts. So you're a Forest season ticket holder to watch Shilts, and you're a Stags fan. Yeah.
It's a bad start, isn't it, this, Paul?
And how did you end up at Notts then? There's been better, to be fair.
No, listen. I reciprocate what the lad said. It was an amazing time. What a great and such a good grounding. But I get onto that. Like I got sort of 15. And everyone had been taken on by this and my age groups and younger than that. And it looked like it wasn't going to happen for me, to be honest. I was playing in, I'd done okay for a couple of years. I started off really well at 12 and 13, maybe 14, just went off the boil a little bit. I'm not grown any. and like that was being held against me already. So I actually played centre forward as well, which I really enjoyed. And it was sort of, I got to 15s and I thought, I'm not getting taken on as a centre forward. I'm not getting taken on as a goalie. Where do I enjoy it the most? I said, well, I enjoy it most in goal. I'm going to stay in goal. And we ended up playing, my team was Sheepbridge in Sutton. And we ended up playing a Notts County youth team at Stoke Bardolph, it was actually.
Stoke Bardolph. I used to get on my push bike when I was a little kid, well, not that little, and watch Notts County Midland Intermediate League games on a Saturday morning. Jimmy Cyril would always be there, and Howard Wilkinson when he was there. And they'd watch it till about 12, leave just after half time, and Notts would then be at home in the afternoon. I'd go and watch Notts in the afternoon.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, anyway, Midland. So you're playing Notts, yeah?
So we ended up playing Notts, and we got beat 5-0 by Notts. Notts battered us. Got 5-0, and I was a bit dejected. And Alan Hill actually came over, and he asked the manager, who was my dad at the time as well. And he said, "Who's the lad in goal?" I don't know if you remember Alan Hill. He was at Forest. Illy was brilliant for me. I mean, I didn't think I was going to get taken on. Like I said, everyone's been took on in my year group, and I've not had a sniff anywhere, to be fair. So I was off just playing it for fun in the end. And then Alan Hill asked who the goalie was, and my dad says, well, "It's my son." Like, he says, "It's just." I mean, I thought nothing of it. I just let 5 goals in, but he's gone. He must have saw something in me and says, "Will he come down to train next week?" And I says, "Absolutely, yeah, I'd love to." Like, so I came down to train. I think the next holidays we trained with Alan, and it was an incredible experience for me. I actually did really well under him, to be fair, and he made me train with the first team at 15 and that. And I was like, "Wow, okay." And a bit like Shills, I ended up, because it was last off of the last pickings. I didn't really play any of the schoolboys days, and I went to watch a reserve game and sort of signed there and then under Alan Hill's guidance at the time. After meeting Mick Walker, and if I'd met Mick before that, I probably wouldn't have bothered signing. No, I'm only joking. Mick was. Do you know what? Mick's one of those, and we still speak about it now. I still see all the old boys now at Notts, and we still speak about it now. And you know, some people didn't get on with it how it was, because it was ruthless. It was ruthless. But my age group, like Bruffy and Gary Pattersons and Michael Johnsons and that, there was 11 of us, I think, and 10 of us got contracts at Notts. There was only Darren Powell who went off to America and doing some great things out there coaching that. But all of us had a career in the game at a decent level and played a lot of football, and none of us were any good. We was like, we had us traits, but it was like something that was instilled in us from us time there, to be honest. And it went for us, and we knew when to dig in. We knew how to fight for everything, and it was brilliant. I'm being a bit harsh on us here. We had some qualities, but we was no way had more ability than, like, say, some of the lads at Forest and that. And we was regularly battering them, and that was all down to, like, the way we was brought up and the camaraderie we had together at the time, and you know what was around the place at the time. So it gave us all a good career in the game and a good grounding.
Several people have said to me, there's a playwright, Billy Ivory, done a lot of the TV series, a big Notts fan. He always describes Notts as a working class club. You're not going to get too many privileges. You're not going to get too many luxuries at Notts County compared to some of the other clubs in the East Midlands, your Leicesters, your Derbys, your Forest. You've alluded to it being quite brutal. I mean, was this still an era of initiation ceremonies? Was this an era when you still had to, ex-watershed, was this an era when you still had to clean boots, and Mark Draper tells stories about he was scared stiff going into the room because he had to look after Rashid Arkouk. Rash watches all these regular, by the way. And Rash, lovely guy now, but I'm told in the day, you didn't want to upset him. I mean, what was that like for you guys as 17-year-olds or whatever it was? Shills?
Well, we all had jobs to do. We all had different. Yeah, I mean, whatever that would have been. I think that was more of a supervisor than doing the jobs, to be honest. Yeah, you used to go in the boot room because one of these lot would turn the lights out, shut the door, and you'd literally get the shit kicked out.
I was going to say that. Wack went quiet, didn't he, when he looked at initiation? Wack, you remember that one? Wack's group was Mafioso. They were your group back, weren't they? They were.
That was
Animals,
lawless.
weren't you?
That was
Remember when
lawless.
you got big lads and took him in the boot room? Then I think you stripped him naked, didn't you? Took him outside on the railings and whipped him. And then I think he started crying.
And then probably
deep him even more.
We used to have our year group. I mean, to be fair, we was brought up hard by Coxie and the second. When we was first years, they had their turn. Like they was the second years, obviously, and they battered us. And we quickly learned. We went in one of the first days, and we played like a second year v first year game. So we thought it was just going to be a normal five-a-side. They absolutely kicked the shit out of us. Honestly, Mick Walker was on their team. We had Wayne Jones as well, the physio, played for the second years, and they battered us. And we was like, we did all right. We hung on for dear life and probably got cheated out of it a little bit at the end. And from Stoke Bardolph back to the ground was the forfeit. You had to run back instead of getting on a mini ball. So we're all the second years. It galvanised us, to be fair, because we're on the way back going, right, let's get together here. There is no way we are losing another one of these games unless we're taking people down. So any time a second v first year games was it was loose. It was hard. If you could survive them, you could survive anything. So we got loads of stick off the second years, Coxie and all them lot. So when it was our turn, the second years, and obviously Shaw's coming in the first years, we probably took it to another level. To be fair,
you did.
We had like, so we used to work on the cheekiest of the week. And so the cheekiest of the week, you get to Friday and we go like, in the end, we wanted just to do bits. So we do a top three. The third one would probably just get like light turned off in the boot room and a few digs. Second one would get for anything from deep heated everywhere to boot polished all over. And the third one, we used to run the bath, freezing cold bath. And it was a bit of extra ingredients in and stuff as well. And then the lads just pin them in the bath, and it was all right. I mean, looking back at it, you think, what is going on now? At a football club now, it just wouldn't happen. And probably rightly so. But back in the day, it was incredible. And we had it done to us. We did it to them, and it made a man of you. Put it that way. You grew up really quick. I mean, even going on to Coxie's, he mentioned about Harty. I mean, one of my first days in the club, this was around that time when Alan Hill asked me to come in. Well, I didn't really know. I'd never been in a football club before. So I've gone into like the away change room, which the lads changed in the second years and the first year, academy lads, not academy then, YTS lads then. So I've gone in and I'm half introducing myself a bit sheepishly. It took in. Next year, I think I went to the bathroom. I've come back out and there's no one in the changing room. So I'm like, where have they gone? I'm thinking, shit, what do I do? So I've gone, and the only voices I could hear was at the top of the room, of the first team room. So I didn't have a clue what I was doing. So I went up, the doors locked, like knocked on the door and opened the door. This is probably first or second day in a football club. This was my first day in a football club. So I opened the door with big Paul Hart. Yes. And he had this piercing stare. I'm like, I proper melted. I went, all the lads have left, like, from there. I'm on trial. I didn't know where to get down. He went, and he tore into me. You ever open this door ever again and all that? And sorry. So I don't know who he was. Like, and in the end, he ended up like, I walked off and I apologised and walked off. He must have liked me not saying anything back. And he's called me back. He went, give me a minute. I said, all right, because they was driving to the training ground. So on my first day, I turned up at the training ground with the club skipper, Paul Hart, and I was in the back like that. So he took me down in there, and what a guy he was. I mean, but when he opened that door, I don't think I've ever shit myself so much in my life. But it was brilliant. It was great.
I think the good thing, though, is that even though they were hard, Mick was hard, Hartley was concrete, wasn't he?
Concrete.
Both of them I thought were kind of excellent coaches and sort of like knew about the game. You know, I mean, me being a centre half, you know, coming through with Hartley was brilliant. Because, you know, when you played in the five-a-sides and that with him, he'd always wear them big Puma Kings with extra long studs on. And then I can remember we went down my shins one day and just said, you should put your pads on. And I was like, sort of, thanks. That reminded me, I'd turn up for training every day from then onwards. But I tell you what, he was brilliant at taking to one side and explaining the game and why they were doing what they did and the methods they used, which I thought was excellent. And like I say, it was brutal, even to the point at some point of, I would imagine there was quite a number of lads that were nearly at breaking point in terms of, mentally.
There's some people that couldn't take it, could they?
Yeah.
Just couldn't hack it.
Yeah.
That was it. They were at breaking point, big time.
Yeah.
Mickey encouraged that side of outside of the game. It was that rough and tumble, that physical side, that never say die, which is what it was. And that stems from those, those 5-a-sides, those first years, these second years, and you would be terrified to lose. But there'd be fights, wouldn't there? There'd be proper scraps, and people would be, rearing up to each other. And then it would come back to the dressing room, and it'd be all right again. It'll be whatever, and crack on, get your jobs done, have another fight.
Absolutely. Well, it's demanding, weren't they? Do you know what I mean? And there's no secret how many lads came through. Listen, it weren't for everyone. We know that, and still some 20-30% of the lads I speak to now is like, nah, it was too much. It was too much. But the rest and who took to it, sort of thing, or as demanding as ruthless it was, it definitely dragged enough out of you to have a real good career out of the game. Definitely, there's a load of lads from that sort of era came through and had real good careers in the game. So it must have been methods.
If you look at that time, if you look around that time, it was probably one of the best clubs around. For just for nurturing kids and bringing them through. It was. I can remember every time we came up against Forest. I can remember one night we played Forest. Talk about methods. I think I was about a year. At school, we just played a youth game. Mick gave us a shot of whiskey in the dressing room.
I remember.
And then we all had a piece of paper with the person's name on it. We were going to screw it up and eat it. And I was like, what? I was a schoolboy at the time, and I look back and I go, how kind of surreal, weird,
unbelievable.
Wow, just.
I remember Slauce. Can you remember Steve Slauce?
I remember that. Yeah.
Left-sided.
Our first FA Youth Cup game when we were first years, he gives Slauce Slauce was smashed. He was smashed, but it's the best he's ever played.
It's funny about the whiskey top whack there, because Trevor Christie, who you guys would obviously know, you'd have probably played with him at Walsall, whack, would you?
No, he's before me. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah, he used to have a tot of whiskey. He was struggling for one game. Jack Wheeler had a medical bag, and he taped up a little small bottle of whiskey, taped it up, wrapped it all up in white, and put liniment on it. And Trevor Christie used to have a tot of whiskey before every game, because the first time he did it, he scored. Pedro used to have a nip of whiskey as well. Jimmy never knew, but it was Jack's liniment bottle that he always used to have in his bag that the players would go and have a tot of whiskey. Look, clearly, whether it's a psychological thing or not, it certainly weren't an isolated thing. It wasn't an isolated thing in those days. Not at Notts, anyway. Not at Notts.
I got a bit carried away on it, though. That's why I got freed.
So you mentioned youth team. Now, I think Coxie was already in the first team by then. This is a fifth round FA Youth Cup, Biggin, Upton Park. I'm going to hold that up so you can see the names. You're there, Whack. You're there, Shirls.
Yeah.
The referee, Dermot Gallagher, by the way, at the bottom.
He was rubbish that night as well. Nothing changed. He gave a penalty away. It was never a penalty. I still remember it like yesterday. It was 1-1, and he gave a penalty to make it 2-1 against me. I jabbed the ball off someone's head and followed through a little bit, and he said it was too aggressive to give a penalty. We lost it 3-1. In fact, that was probably the first and only time I've cried after a football match. 3-1 in the change rooms. It was devastating. So it was semi-final, I think that was, wasn't it?
Quarter-final, I think. Fifth round, quarter-final, I think.
We was flying as well. We fancied ourselves. I think we beat Arsenal.
We beat Arsenal, that's right, yeah.
I'm watching everybody that year, weren't you?
Beat everyone, smashed them as well.
Yeah.
And we fancied ourselves to win it. And he gave the penalty and changed the game, and that was it. I've never liked ref since that. That's why there's a lot to answer for, he has.
Who was your youth team manager in that cup run then? Who was taking charge of it?
That was Mick, wasn't it?
That was Mick.
Yeah, Mick Walker was all the way through, I think, for us. He went That was funny. He went, actually, I mean, that's probably to get onto that later. He went to the first team manager, and he was the one that released me. So I'd had him for 2-3 years. We'd done unbelievable. Do you know what? I'm making right at the time, but that's a different story. But he was mine throughout it, Mick, and he was. I give him a lot of stick as well, but he was brilliant. He was great for me.
It's amazing. I just shown you that team sheet. You know, and you 500 odd games for Walsall. You can remember, by the sounds of it, that West Ham game like it was yesterday. I'm guessing, did you go on the old first team bus and all of that sort of thing? Have a little pre-match meal? I mean,
steady forward.
Probably went on the minibus.
Don't forget.
I might have pushed the boat out a little bit there.
We probably went on a minibus, and son of Mick, Johnny Brough, was probably driving it.
Yeah. It was fish and chips pre-match.
Fish and chips pre-match, brilliant.
And then he'd come back down the embankment. Jeffrey Carlett was parked up. Was that with his full beam on?
Interaction with the senior pros. You've mentioned Harty a couple of times. Did you still clean boots in those days, or had that been outlawed by them?
I clean. It should have been outlawed. I cleaned Steve Cherry's for 2 years and got absolutely naff all. And he had Puma Kings as well. And I can remember, if there was any dirt on the white of the Puma, I'd just get filled in, and I'd be Tipp-Exing the white and everything through. And I'm expecting at least a decent tip. Like, lads have got Drapes and Tommy and all that, and they're getting like 100 quids and a couple hundred quid here and there. I think I got a pair of old gloves off Ches like that. There you go. Think so lucky. Cheers, Ches. He was brilliant though. I love Ches. What a guy. What a goalie as well.
Yeah, it was.
Coxie, whose boots did you clean?
I started off on Drapes, but then he gave me the clip round the ear roll after a bit. I weren't up to scratch. So it was another hard taskmaster. Drapes was. So.
Well, see, I'd have thought it'd have been quite easy going. I mean, I know Drapes well, but no.
Nah, he's up to a point, but you know, I think Drapes in him as well. So I think it's twice. I think it was only the bottoms near the studs as well. I don't think it was even the leather bits. It was, and that was it. I got a clip around the ear hole, and Drapes were flying. Drapes were flying at that bit, weren't they? They were like really doing well. So yeah, I didn't last long with him. I had a cushy job. I was on kit.
I was going to say, and let's face it, I can't see you doing a lot of menial tasks like that, Coxie. You'd have been like, nah. Let me say, Coxie was ahead of his time, definitely. Like, as a centre half, because back in the day it was like you got to head it 40 yards that way, 50 yards that way. You got to boot everything. I remember Coxie like bringing it down the odd time, coming over the top of someone.
Oh. He'll dial back in. Well, Shills, whose boots were you cleaning?
So I'm reminded of this by it was Dean Thomas. So Tomo, he's got connections with my older brother in the industry that they both work in, and they occasionally bump into each other at dues and whatever else. And he's forever saying, you know, I remember your brother, you know, cleaning my boots, and you know what a shit job he used to do. You know, the usual. So yeah, I still occasionally bump into Dean Thomas.
Did he used to sing in the dressing room? Because he does the old singing, don't he now? The old cabaret.
Yes, I see that on his Zoom sessions, doesn't he, with his cabaret and whatever, Frank Sinatra and stuff. Yeah. So, but no, Dean Thomas. Yeah.
While we're waiting for Wack to rejoin us, so you've gone through the initiations, you've cleaned the boots, all the rest of it. Coxie, you would have been first to make your debut. I guess that's a moment, you know, in the senior first team that you never forget, correct?
No, yeah. I flashback. Neil was at the club, Neil Warnock. Wack was going on to it then a little bit. We had Dean Yates at the club, who's probably one of the most cultured centre backs around, 21. Looked at Dean, everything he did, and I was getting on really well. And I think it was a year when I was in the old first division, and yeah, I got travelled a few times with the team, and I got the last game of the season away at Main Road at Manchester City, and I remembered like Neil saying, you're going to be on the bench, and I thought, well, I'm going to be on the bench, and that was when I think the behind the goal knockdown.
Yeah.
Just a big board of like faces, and he got to about 80 odd minutes, and I thought, well, I've just loved it, being involved with the first team. Neil said, go and get yourself ready. Which, a million and one butterflies went off in my stomach, and I thought, I wonder which centre half he's going to bring off. And he said, I'm trying to think he brought off, and I went on at centre midfield. And I always remember the ball. Tell you what, it was Steve McMahon come flying in at me, and I thought, I'm going to get, I'm going to get smashed here. And I had a touch, and he just held off and just kind of directed me, and I thought, this is quite good. This is, they allow you to play at this level. You know what I mean? We've been used to, sort of reserve team football and stuff like that, where everyone's smashing each other, and it was fantastic. Never forget it. I think we lost 1-0. I think Niall Quinn scored it, was it?
Yeah.
On the day. I'm not too sure that game relegated us, was it?
Yeah. It was a bad year. Yeah, it was a bad year.
So and then I probably had to wait for my full real debut. Was when I think after the Sunderland game, was it the FA Cup where Neil got sacked?
Correct. It was a night game, wasn't it? They booed him, didn't they?
Yeah.
They booed him.
Yeah, and then Mick took over, and I was on the bench away at Luton, and we had a few injuries, I think, and then made my full debut away at Leicester. Might have played alongside Charlie Palmer, I think, the centre half, against Ian Ormond-Droyd and David Speedy. I think they two up there. So we drew 1-1. I think that was it. I think I stayed in the side then for the rest of the season, and we, I think culminating in us. I think we beat Sunderland last game of the season.
Yeah.
To stay up, which was fabulous. I think it was more or less nearly a full house at Meadow Lane that day. Yeah, it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant year for me. That was, in terms of, we look back at the times we had as apprentices, but for everything to fall into place and to make your debut and become a first team player was just a dream.
So that's a good news story. That's Coxie making his debut. We'll come to Shirls in a minute. Whack. So,
sorry I lost you there, by the way, folks. That's because I was just about to blow smoke up Cox's arse, so I'm glad it went off.
Right. So, you didn't make your debut at Notts. You were released at Notts. So, talk us through what that is like when you are 19 or 20, whatever age you were, having not been able to make a debut. I mean, how was the news broken to you, for instance?
How long you got, by the way?
I think people are interested because it's difficult, isn't it? We've seen at Manchester City, support mechanisms that need to be in professional football clubs. Clearly now with social media and the scrutiny is a great deal higher, I would guess. But it must be a very, very difficult time when you are a young lad to basically have that dream cut, certainly without making one senior appearance, having been with the club for several years.
No, absolutely. It was a real tough time. I'm not going to lie about it, but it's one of those. Do you know what? It was not to my own fault. I should have done a lot better there, to be honest. I'll not make no excuse to that. Mick Walker was right to release me at the time. But at the time, I lashed out. Well, at the time, he told me I lashed out because I'd sort of been injured, if I remember right. And I'd had a bit of bad luck. I could have gone on loan and played at Birmingham, and they ended up sending Bob Catlin at the time, wrongly. Ian Atkins, I think, was the Birmingham assistant manager. And I was playing in the residence at Notts at the time and doing really well. Ches was playing. Ches was brilliant. So I was backing him up nicely. Bob Catlin weren't getting a look in at the time. And Ian Atkins came to watch a game, reserve game I played in, and said to the manager then, was it Terry Cooper at Birmingham, I think it was then, and said, yeah, take the reserve kid on loan. He's only a young kid, but he'll do a great job after what I've just seen. So I didn't know none of this, by the way. So apparently I only heard this afterwards. And apparently Bob Catlin, like they rang Mick Walker up, and Mick thought they must have meant Bob, and so they've sent Bob along on loan.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's only about 3 foot of difference anyway, but sort of an Australian, and he was about 3 foot bigger than me, but I don't know. But anyway, Bob Catlin turned up and trained on the first day, signed the forms with the manager, Terry Cooper, who had not seen the game. Ian Atkins came in after and went, who's that? And he went, that's the goalie you told me to take. He went, no, he was a little fella with blonde hair. And that's how, so from then, Bob went on loan and I was playing in the reserves at Notts. And I was doing okay. I sort of faded a little bit towards the end. I think Black Orchid and stuff took over a little bit. But
I was going to come on to it because we've had a punter who follows the Magpie Circle. I'm glad you've reminded me. We'll continue with the story in 5 seconds, but remind me because someone's written in who said they were an assistant manager at Ritz's and Shirls was a regular. So we've got to grill about that in a minute. We've got to grill about that.
He used to like the other 25s night, Shirls, when he was 18. He was for the Cougars.
Shirls and Simo.
Shirls and Simo. Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
We'll come on to that in a minute. So, reserves, your form's dipped a bit. Yeah?
Well, yeah, so long story short, I mean, I got injured.
Right.
I did my groin sort of at that time, and I had to have the meshing, and it was a new technology thing. But so I had a couple of months out. In that time, Bob Catlin came back and actually did really well in the resis and pushed Ches all the way, to be fair. So as I was coming back to fitness, it's funny because I mean, it's mad how you remember things. I mean, it's how many years ago? It must be 30 years ago. Yeah. It's ridiculous. But I remember, like, I'd just done the 3 Bridges run. I don't know if the lads remember, like, I didn't run very often, but I was trying to get fit. So I'd done a 3 Bridges run. And I came back and I had a pint of water in my hands. I was next to it, and someone said, Mick wants to see you. I said, all right. And I knew my contract was up in the next couple of months. So I thought, well, he's going to offer me a new deal. Like, so I'm in my head. I've even wrote it down on a piece of paper, like what I wanted. I mean, it weren't a great deal anyway, but I wrote on a piece of paper to remind me so I didn't melt when I was in there. And I've gone in, he's pulled me in, he started bleating on about, you stopped coming for crosses, you've not grown. I'm like, where's this going?
Not your fault you've not grown, is it?
Well, as a goal, I was only about 5'4", so it wasn't so good being a goalie. But like, so he's on me and saying that, and I thought, where's he going with this? Like, and he went, and he just out of the blue, without any warning, he went, I'm going to release you. And I was like, you what? So I mean, I had a minute to recover, and I've basically ripped the paper up like a betting slip. That went on the floor for the wages. And then I've sort of lashed out a little bit there. I said, hold on a minute. And I've sort of gone into him going, I've done that well for you for a couple of years. You've got the manager's job on the back of this. No way would you got it if I weren't there. And I was chopsying back in the day, which nothing really changed anyway. But so I started giving him a little bit back and all that. And he go, well, and he was right. He go, well, you've stopped taking it serious. You're out all the time. You're not, look, your size. You need to be doing everything bigger and better than everyone else. Like you said, you stopped going for crosses when you played. Bob's took over you. I'm releasing it's for your own good as well. I'm like, and I lost my head a little bit, and I had that pint of water, and it went all over his wall, smashed everywhere. Slade came in the room, who was manager as well, assistant at the time with him, and he'd been with us through there. So I think I gave him a little bit. I think he got something bold. Something might have came out. What are you looking at? You're bold. And I had a little kick off at him, and I've gone back round to the change rooms, and I was gone inside. I'm sat there, and lads going, "You're right." I can't remember who was in the change room, but there's only 3 or 4 lads still in there. It was later afternoon, and like, "You're right." I went, "Just been released." He went, "What?" They couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. So I just wanted to get out of there, to be fair, because that's my first real setback as such sort of thing. It's a massive setback, you know. So I've just got out of there and got home, and it was only sat with me nan, bless her. She was my biggest fan, so I thought, well, at least I'll get my ego back with my nan, and rest in peace, bless her. But so I'm having a bite to eat with her, and she's like, well, what are you going to do now? And I actually looked, I thought, I actually don't know. I ain't got a clue. So that was one of those. It was really difficult. And like, I mean, there's a little bit of support now. There should be more. But back in the day, that was nothing. You was just on your own. That was you done. You're out the door. There was no one to speak to. There was no, mentors or anything like that, apart from your family, and who don't really know the ins and outs of football as such. So it was a real tough time, because I'm thinking I had no contact end with the club. The club, I'd finished at the club. I had about a month left on my contract. I didn't want to go in because I was embarrassed. So I just stayed out of the way, really. And I actually remember after that in the summer, I went away. Lads always went away at the end of the season anyway. So I went on that holiday for a couple of weeks with the lads to Tenerife. I ended up staying for another 3 weeks longer. So I had about 5 or 6 weeks out in Tenerife. And I thought, you know what? That's me done. I'm not coming back. I just couldn't cope with the rejection, to be fair. I'd sort of gone from being, everyone thought I was a real good goalie, everyone praising me, to like a nosedive within 5 or 6 months. And then got released on the back of it. And it was like, my whole world had crashed. I thought, right. I said, sack it, can't deal with that. And I buried my head in the sand, literally, and played the Las Americas, which was not a bad thing, don't get me wrong. It was a great 6 weeks. But I ended up coming back. I ended up coming back home after so long, because I think I'd run out of money, to be fair. And I'm sat there with my dad, and pre-season was not so far away, and Walsall had watched the game the season before, and they fancied us, and they'd been on the phone, but I battered them off, and I think it was Walsall and Torquay, that was it. And there was my only 2, and I was like, and ended up, Paul Taylor, who was at Walsall at the time, he rang me, and my dad said, speak to him. I went, no, I'm not speaking to him. So my old man ended up sitting me down and going, right, what do you want to do with your life, basically? Because you're going to either be a degenerate and let everything go, or you never forgive yourself. Like, give it another go and give it a real shot. So it was one of those. It was a real wake-up call. I rang. I mean, it's a Walsall story, this one, but I rang Paul Taylor back.
Yeah.
Sorry, still there?
Yeah.
Still there? You. So I rang Paul Taylor back on the Sunday morning, and I thought, well, he said, have you been keeping in shape and all that? Bear in mind, I'm in 6 weeks in Tenerife. I'm like, yeah. I've been really, really keeping in shape. I was about at least a stone and a half overweight. And I had a skinhead over there and that, because it was easier. And so I lied to him, and I'm thinking, well, at least I'll have a week to get in some sort of shape. And I said, when you're back in, he went, we're in tomorrow. I was like, oh, bad times. So I ended up going there. So I nearly blew that as well, to be honest. But I dug in, and they saw something in me there that Alan Hill must have seen back in the day, and the rest was history, so to speak, from there. But it would have been easy for me to walk away. At the time, I was that close. And so just my dad sitting me down, having a close family like that was needed.
Sliding doors moment, isn't it? If you'd stayed
Absolutely.
at Notts another year, maybe, Ray Clements that we started this off with, you go on to be massive number of appearances for Walsall. Let's just bring Shirls in. So you got into the team, yeah? Your debut?
I mean, I remember it well. It was a midweek game under the lights. I think it was a Tuesday night. And Notts were in the championships then. It was against Birmingham. And I think from memory, I played left back. And I was marking Ted McMinn. They called him the Tin Man, is that what you used to call him? So marking Ted McMinn. And I remember, being told that I think I got told the morning of the game that I was playing, and Mick was the manager. But I think looking back, you talk about the transition from youth team to reserves, but because everybody was so closely knit, it didn't seem such a big jump, because Coxie had played, Tommy Gallagher had played, Michael Simpson had played, Michael Johnson would have been in the team. So these were people that I'd been around all my time at Notts. So
in summary, Shirls, everyone except Wacker got into the first team.
yeah, basically. So it didn't feel
about
like,
right.
It was a big jump, clearly it was, but in terms of, there were people there that we knew and were familiar with, and the surroundings were familiar. So that was a debut. That was and then I mean, at my time, and I was never, like I've said before, I was never a household name or anything like that, but I still look back on those days, as we said at the start, very fondly, in terms of making you the person that you are today. I mean, a lot of my pals, a lot of my close mates are big Notts County fans. So for me to make, the debut for Notts, to play in the Forest game, the Charlie Palmer game, where he scored and we won that game, as a Nottingham lad to play in that game, that was a big occasion, for me. Some fond memories, definitely.
I mean, I used to look back and watch Phils and that playing, and not wonder what if, because I was doing my own thing at Walsall, but just look back and see the lads doing so well was brilliant. I remember them games, and to be fair, Sudsy and all the rest of your mates, they was delighted you made them appearances, mate, because they lived off you in Ritzy.
Oh, yeah. That's it. They were always next to us, weren't they, in the queue for Black Orchid?
No, they was queuing. We were straight in.
Yeah.
I was going to say, if nothing else, Shirls, when you made your debut and you scored was against Portsmouth, that must have enabled you to jump the queues at Ritz's. Yeah.
Well, we used to get. I think we used to get these gold cards, didn't we, at the Orchids?
Yeah, big gold cards.
Yeah. So whatever, I don't know. The marketing department was sorted out at Notts with the Black Hawk, and I think Ritzy as well. And yeah, we did get on first name terms with the bouncers at Ritzy. You know, after games we sometimes pop in for a beer and stuff. So.
Coxie, you're keeping very quiet on nightclub admissions. Where were you? Were you at the Sun Inn in Eastwood or something?
I was an angel. I was an absolute angel. I never went out. I never went out with these two animals. No, yeah, she was just. Yeah, I mean, we're on to everything was at your disposal, wasn't it? You just, you got the cards. We always had a route around town, didn't we? And when you look at it, it was into Browns and the bottles of strawberry wine.
Strawberry wine.
Yeah,
strawberry wine. And no wonder I got released.
So yeah, it's like I say, they were interesting times, and we always used to bump into quite a lot of the Forest boys.
Yeah,
especially in Browns. We used to get told how crap we were then, and how much money they were on. You remember all those times? And, but they were brilliant times. Like I say, everything about life at that stage, the animalistic nature of football, but the sort of social aspect. I mean, I think the one thing about the club at that time is that everybody was like galvanised. Everyone stuck together. We went out and partied together, didn't we? And if any bother or anything like that, lads always stuck together. Like I've just listened to you, Shirls, when you said there was a lot of young lads coming through in and around the first team at the time, and it was a fantastic part of the club's history in terms of bringing some of the kids that were coming through, and especially at the level of football, because when we talk about making debuts and that, people naturally assume you're in the second division or but it was championship stroke sort of Premiership football at that stage, wasn't it, as it is now? So I think a lot of young players that took everything in the stride really, really easily because of, I think, the upbringing that we had. That's all what I think everyone wanted, was to get out on the pitch. The pitch was sort of sacred, wasn't it? I mean, if you got out on there, it was such a buzz play for the club. At those times it was frightening.
Absolutely. I mean, I like I said, I mean, obviously, I got released and didn't get that opportunity to play, but that took everything I learned there, as camaraderie, as working as hard as you can for your teammates, and being real good pals on and off the pitch. I took that with me all along, and that stood me in real good stead. And Mick was, and like, let me just make it right, Mick was bang right to release me at the time. Although I think my nan listened to a radio show about 5 years later, I think it was with Colin Slater or something, and he actually admitted that he'd made a mistake. I think Notts might be playing Walsall or something, and I'd played a lot of games then, and my nan was more buzzing than me, to be honest. So she's heard him say, yeah, I made a mistake, so she was delighted. But he was bang right to do it, and it actually made me a better person and a better player for it, to be honest. I'd learned what I'd learned there, but I'd gone off the rails, and I took the good things from there and went on from that for the rest of it.
I think we mentioned earlier in this, someone, forget who, you would have all been at the tail end of Jimmy Cyril around the club. Yeah? Or in terms of when you were very young schoolboys, Jimmy would have been there, the cow shed, doing his Cruyff turns and drills. Dean Yates tells stories. He used to have some sweets in his pocket and would say, do you want a moobs? I mean, Coxie, you would remember Jimmy, presumably.
Yeah, I took it as a privilege because Jimmy was. I don't think I don't know what role he took on right near the end, and I'm talking about the Howard Kendall sort of around that sort of era. I'm sure it was where the new stand was built and the new dressing rooms were there. And I remember Jimmy used to just. It was really surreal, but Jimmy always used to come and have a bath.
You've took the words out of my mouth. Just words out of my mouth.
The biggest thing with Jimmy is I can remember because I just had I remember sitting in the dressing room and Jimmy just walked stark naked like into the room, and the bath was going on, and then he'd have a shave in the bath, but like sort of takes out of his face, and all the time the bath was just overflowing and just running everywhere. And the thing about Jimmy is I can remember going in and just saying, look, sort of, I didn't know, it was like talking to God at that stage. He was just high in such high esteem. And I can remember just saying something like, you know, is there anything you want? And he went off and talked about football. And for half an hour, I can remember just sitting there and just sitting there like a little puppy dog, you know, just wow, just what this guy had, you know, his knowledge of the game, his not just knowledge of the game, but his life experience and how he integrated both into each other. You know, the football and the life experience was absolutely mind blowing, and something like say that I would never ever forget. And then he'd get out the bath and just never had a towel, but just walk straight out the bath, walk straight out, and then just leave his bath kind of overflowing. So you'd have to kind of just, I don't know if you two like, you know, sort of like experience that, but you'd have to sort of like creep up all the floods in the dressing room afterwards. But look, I mean, what he did for the club, could actually walk on water anyway for me. It was just such a...
It's funny you mentioned the bath story, Paul. Because when I did my book, Tony Cuthbert, who came in as kind of the new secretary.
I know Tony was
Derek
at
Pavis,
Ilkeston, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's it. Striker at Ilkeston. So Derek Pavis takes the club, and Jimmy had been very much with Jack Dunnett for like 25 years. And Derek came in, Derek would come in about 87, something like that. And the first thing he did, he took John Barnwell as manager, and he basically called Jimmy Cyril in and just says, right, you're gone. You're the old regime. This is kind of the brutality, not just at junior, at apprentices. Yeah. I think football is very brutal. And because Jimmy said, well, what do you want me to do? And Derek's gone, I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to leave. You know, this was an institution at Notts. So Jimmy's gone. And so then and Tony Cuthbert's come in as the new secretary. And then for 2 or 3 years after that, Jimmy would come in an afternoon. Just, you know, 2 or 3 afternoons a week. He'd go to reception. He'd just walk through reception, and Tony Cuthbert would be there. And like Tony, just like you, Paul, it didn't. What you doing, Jimmy? It just, oh, hello, Jimmy. Jimmy would walk in, even though he was no longer employed by the club, and he'd disappear for about an hour, and then he'd come back out and walk out again. Good day. And Tony said it took him about 3 months to pluck up the courage to ask what Jimmy was doing. He says, I'll come from my bath. Oh, that's all right then. So he just went in. And in a way, it's sad, but it clearly become, Notts County was just his life, wasn't it? So he wanted a bath. So he went into Meadow Lane 3 afternoons a week to have a bath. And he just didn't think anything of it, because that's what he'd always done down the years. All the old 70s players, there's legendary stories about his bathroom habits, and he used to wear a rubber suit when he'd train in it, and he would just be soaked in sweat, you know, like these sweat boiler suits.
Yeah,
have one of them, and he'd jump in the bath, strip off his rubber thing, and just sling it in the bath, and leave it for the YTs then to wash his sodden, sweaty rubber sweatsuit in the bath. So,
well,
you know,
Coxie never did that, even for Jimmy Cyril. I know that for a fact. You might have been the only man you'd have done it for.
No, I wasn't really good at it, was I? You know?
No, he was never good at that, mate. He was good at some stuff, but not that. Lots of stuff, but not so good at working like that.
I was good at giving orders to some of the
Yeah, he was great at giving orders. Hey, talking about that bath, I don't know if Shaw's remember that one, but we used to have to go and sing for us Christmas money. I never got any anyway, but you had to go and sing anyway. And you'd have to do it in your slips, and you stand on the table in there. And then if you sung and you did all right, you'd probably just get ice water thrown over you, not too much. I went in, I thought, I'm going balls out here. And I went, this one's for Nicky Law. And I'm on the table in there. I started singing Little Donkey. Yeah, I got absolutely battered. I got, like, to the point, I was like, I took them home because it was that bad a beating. I thought, right, that's it. They all went off to training. I was still around. So the bath, we just had a new slipper bath with the jacuzzi bits in it. Oh, yeah. So I went and got all the stuff from the washroom off Margaret. Can you remember Margaret? Bless her. I went and got all of that. She said, "Why are you taking that jar?" I said, "Don't worry about that. I'm just do a bit of washing." And I've just filled the jacuzzi with all the bubble bath, with all the wash stuff, and left it on running. And it was like a foam party in there after. And they'd have a clue who it was. I was like, "Ah, yeah." I think I got chased for about 4 days though. There was foam over the clothes and everything. It was brilliant. All over the first team room. Brilliant.
With the exception of WAC, it was a production line, and it was a way in to get to make your senior debut at Notts. You know, you've alluded to it. You know, you can rattle loads of names off you: Wayne Faircloughs, Paul Smallish, Darren Davises. There was a whole string where, you know, a large proportion of each YT or apprentice intake got a chance. So they didn't necessarily make 300 appearances for Notts, but they got a chance, didn't they? They got a chance to show whether they're good enough. If you look at Notts recently, clearly there's been a relegation. One of what many fans would say, and we're not just talking, you know, the last 12 months, you're talking over 8, 9, 10 years. I can't think of a single player that has come into the team and made 50, 60, 70 appearances for the club. Hayden Hollis, Curtis Thompson in and out, doing very well at Wycombe. But there's been a real dearth of younger players not getting in. And I don't know whether you have any views on this, Ipswich. Should clubs like Notts, or do clubs have a positive philosophy whereby you almost say, we're going to sling in 2 or 3 kids, you know, because they're borderline. We're not sure whether they can, but if we don't play them, we don't. Or should it always be totally on merit? You've got to play out your skin and all the rest of it. And some clubs like Notts, historically with Jimmy, brought players into the game, didn't they? They brought players into the game. Final point. Is it now in the modern game? Because Notts have lost a few. Tete to Tottenham. They had a Chinese guy that's gone to Wolves. Some of these get picked before they can play anyway. You know, you look at McGoldrick at Sheffield United at the minute. He was a Notts youngster. You know, he was but I think played about 1.5 games and then got poached, inverted commas, by Southampton. Leon Best was another. I mean, what's your take now as a young lad trying to get into the first team?
Well, I think, to be honest as well, especially fans, and rightly so, they love to see like homegrown talent coming through the academies and playing. And right, so there's nothing better. It's amazing. And like you say, you name some of the names that have come through there and played at Notts. It was, you know, the fans identified, I think, with these sort of players as well. And it's great. I mean, it's definitely changed a lot over the years. And like you mentioned there, sometimes you're thrown in before you're ready anyway, because maybe chairman could think they could make a couple of quid on him. Quick, 12, 15 games, we'll get him in the team. He's skillful. We can get him sold. Whereas, you know, for me, it's a bit short-term thinking anyway. I'm not saying the chairman now does it. I don't know down there, but I've come across it a few times where they've just thrown him in early to get him sold, and they'll get a quick 2 mil because the 2 mil to the Prem club now on taking the chances, nothing. Which, if it was done the right way, you could probably ground them for 2 or 3 years, make them better people anyway, to make them a better player in the future, you know. And then they could probably go on to have a real good long career. Sometimes they're just thrown in and a commodity sort of thing. I think, you know, there's a lot said for, you know, for especially your family and your agents, etc., and people around you, but the lads in your changing room as well. Because we as good lads, if any of us got out of line or got big time, you get pulled back down massively. You get told what was right and wrong. And I think times have changed. A lot of that has gone out of the game. But what will always stand the test of time is you know, good players coming through the academy and making their debuts. There's nothing better for the fans to see. Like you mentioned, Ipswich at the minute, where I'm there at the minute. I mean, we've got this. It's a bit like Notts back in the day, to be honest. They've got a real good setup down there. And they keep churning out these young kids at the minute. There's always 2 or 3, 4 or 5 this year involved. There's another 4 or 5 waiting in the wings. And I think it's a massive, especially for clubs Division 1 downwards. I think it's harder for the clubs above that, but you know, like Notts Counties, Ipswich, and teams like that, it's the lifeblood of the club. Always has been, and should always be. You know, I think if you invest in the youth right, and I think we've got to arse about tit a little bit in England at times, and some of the first team coaches get the best money, whereas I think in Holland or different places, sort of lower down, the kids teams, they get the best coaches in at the kids teams, because they know if they get them right at the right ages and teach them the right things at that, it'll stand them in good stead for coming through, not only for their club to make the debut, but to go on then at the right time and be sold as well.
Coxie, you've got sort of first-hand experience of all of this, really. You're a local boy, came through the ranks, played for your team or your great-granddad's team, and then you've managed. I mean, what's your take on all of this debate, this kind of equation? You know, should you positively discriminate for young players to demonstrate there's a pathway? Does there have to be a pathway? Should everything be judged solely on merit? Where are you with it all?
Well, first and foremost, I think every club should look to bring kids through. I went into Mansfield, and I think at that stage, the football in the community was just running a youth setup. So you get mixed, a mixed process in your head, because, you know, a manager, you lose 5 on the bounce, you're sacked. So yeah. A lot of managers now will think real short term in terms of win. You know, I worked with John Radford, who you know, his philosophy was not just to get the club out of that league, but to build a football club, which was excellent. And I've done it at sort of Eastwood. We'd set up the academy with Eastwood, you know, with the local colleges. Mansfield was still, there were a lot of people who were still thinking it was a massive football league club, and you know, they needed some honest, some honesty really going in there. And I just told them that, you know, we needed to build an infrastructure at a football club, and the infrastructure of any football club is a good youth system. Now, you know, I set it up with West Notts College initially, and now obviously Richard, a friend of mine, he's the academy director. Obviously they're in the EPPP now, but they've still got about 150 to 200 kids coming through with the college team, which is, not only does it, you know, it brings you a conveyor belt of kids coming through, but it helps finance the club as well, and it helps, you know, the purse strings of, you know, the chairman. So I mean, my honest opinion is, I think if you're good enough, you're old enough. I give what his name was now, he was, I'm sure he was just turned 17 in League Two when I gave him his debut, local boy. And it wasn't based on, you know, is he a Mansfield lad, and will I get any, you know, kudos, you know, from supporters or everyone around the club. It was like, this boy's good enough, so he should be playing. And I think you're looking at Mansfield now. You know, they're getting. The thing about society now is everyone wants things yesterday.
Yeah, instant.
Internet, food, and I think sometimes when we look at a football club, I look at the position that Notts are in at the minute, and to build the club and to get out that league now and to take them back where they used to be, I think there has to be a plan, whether it's a 2-year, 5-year, 10-year plan. And it might be 10-year and you can't just have it by throwing money at the first team. I think that's just false economy. I think you need to put a lot of money into youth system, you know, bring good kids through, have that solid foundations, infrastructure of a club the size of Notts, which is, you know, wouldn't look out of place once again at championship level, in my opinion. But just make sure you're not just throwing sort of, you know, money at it in the first team. You know, there's too many people now, I think, going to these clubs. Get rid of the youth system, because it'll put them another $100,000 a year on their first team budget. But once again, it's false economy for me. You know, get the youth set up right. Look, you've got to get results, I think, as a first team manager. Otherwise, you're not in the job long. But I think it can be done consistently, doing both, by bringing, you know, good people in around you, good coaches. What I just said about, you know, investing in good coaches at youth level. I mean, you know, we've just spoke now, you know, for the last 45 minutes about Mick Walker, Paul Hart. And these are the people. And if you go back to the, you know, to the conveyor belt, Smalls, Wayne Fairclough, all these people. There was a reason why these people were coming through on a conveyor belt. And I look at it, and I think it was the coaching infrastructure that came down from Jimmy Howard. Everyone seems to forget that Howard was at the club at certain points.
Massive fan of Howard. Never got into the top division. Jimmy on his own would never have got Notts into the top division. No. Howard
was one of the most articulate coaches I've ever listened to. Once again, I could listen to hours on end, phone call, and he would. You could understand why he was so successful as a coach and why he's where he is. But all these good coaches at certain age groups, I don't think it was rocket science why there were so many good young players came through. I think they weren't coached well. They were schooled in a kind of mentality of what this game was all about and how to be successful in it. And I think any football club, I think sometimes the morals and ethics that we got taught, I don't know if the two boys would agree with me, sometimes kind of filtered away from the game a little bit. And I'd like to see somebody like, Paul Hart, everywhere he's gone, I think, especially his youth team coach, has been a great success. I'd love to have seen Mick Walker in the game now. The lads would probably agree. Some of his morals and ethics and some of the ways he taught the game might be a little bit sort of raise a few eyebrows now. But the one thing I know from the people that I work with and obviously Shields and Wack was, they produce footballers. They produce footballers, and not just footballers that were good technically, but they produced young men that had a resilience and a mental toughness about them. And I look back and I go, it was like it was magical time for me. I've just heard the two lads now, magical for them. It didn't really hurt me, even though some of the things we went through were hard on you physically, absolutely, sometimes destroyed you mentally, but gave you that thick skin, gave you that resilience. I've taken a lot of what I learned in my apprenticeship days, bypassed football as a player, I've taken that into the management side, because the game's getting tougher, the margins are getting finer. You lose 3 games on the bounce now in any past year, and people want to change. So overall now, football clubs, I think in being honest with supporters and everyone around the club, and if you look what Neil did when he come into the club, he formed a club, even though probably he wasn't as popular as probably a choice as it, other people might have been. And one thing, he was given time. He built it. I think it's just investment into the football club as a whole, and that for me it has to be in that infrastructure of youth. It has to be from 6-year-olds upwards. Good coaching, schooling them, good education, bringing them through. But it's important. I don't know if you, when you get to that sort of 15, 14, 15, 16-year-old, when you start come out the boys' man's body and mind, I think that it's so key to have the right people around you so you're developing it in all different factors of the game.
Yeah. It's very interesting what you say, Paul. And we had Ricardo Moniz on here about a month ago. Ricardo's challenge was he didn't keep the club up when they first came in, and then there was a huge emphasis on him to get results. And he played football in a certain attacking way. It was always going to be high risk as to whether he could get those instant results. It was very interesting talking to him about his philosophy and bearing out what you were saying, Wack, in terms of an idea, a progression, investment in coaching, in young players. And he knew Jimmy Cyril. Jimmy Cyril tried to sign him when he was a player in Holland in about 1982, because Jimmy used to go over to Holland on a Sunday from East Midlands Airport and go to the Curver School and watch how they did the skills and the training. And that's why Jimmy in the cowshed used to do all them little drills with maybe with you, Coxie, but with people, Dean Yates. Dean will tell you the stories about how they're all dribbling this ball around, and he got all that from Holland. So Jimmy was in many respects, very many years ahead of his time. He had Mick Walker that kind of followed in those principles. And you guys are all living testimony. It doesn't matter ultimately that you didn't get a game whack, it does for you, but you were clearly good enough to be a very successful footballer. The good thing about Notts at that time was 90% of that group that became good enough to play professional football for a period of time played it with Notts. The challenge I think Notts have had recently is that there's still been players come through, but they've not been identified. They've left. My son who produces all of these, his mate is Colby Bishop. He was allowed to leave Notts. He went to Leamington. Accrington, John Coleman has clearly got a very good scouting system. He's took Colby, top scorer up there. He's probably worth quite a lot of money now. He's probably worth a lot of money at Accrington. Pedro Richards' son, Jordan, was allowed to leave. He's now at Kings Lynn, who are in the same division as Notts County. Curtis Thompson was allowed to leave, and he's played for 2.5 years at Wickham under Gareth Ainsworth in a group in a setup that has got 2 promotions into the Championship. And I think you can never spot all of them, but for me, I think there's a lot of frustration overall that those are players that you'd have liked to see play a few more games. And if Colby Bishop had played 25 games for Notts and only scored 2 goals, fair enough. Maybe he needs a change of scenery. But that whole progression at Notts, somehow or other, has been lost. We don't produce players, however unpalatable that might be to some people, we don't produce players that get into the first team on a regular basis. Hasn't happened for a long period of time. Sam Osborne left last year. He's at Leamington, scored 4 goals in the last 2 games, winger. He'll be, I'm not a pro. I think he stands a chance. And I think there is an element of frustration at the minute that the club has gone down that transient, inverted commas, without being disrespectful, professional route. The 33-year-old, the 34-year-old that comes here on a 1-year contract, doesn't move into the area, released at the end of the year, having played 4 games. Now, I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do. It strikes me as that for Notts County and that type of club, it's not an economic best practice because you want to promote your younger players. And your point, Paul, I think the club now has quite a big task on its hands to get back out of the National League. The reality is we're in the National League, and it pains me to say it because we deserve to be. I could not tell you one single Notts fan that wouldn't say we didn't deserve to get relegated 18 months ago, because we were one of the worst two teams in Division 4, whatever you want to call it, that season. And it really pains me, as you guys were talking about Notts as a big club, we got absolutely battered and outplayed by Harrogate in a Wembley Cup final. I come from an era when that shouldn't have happened. Fair play to Harrogate's manager and their players. They were miles better than us on the day. I still, as a fan, find it really difficult to come to terms with that. Really difficult. Any thoughts? Sorry, I'm getting off my chest, everyone.
I think the thing, Paul, is that football doesn't respect anybody. It doesn't respect your name. And my experience of the National League is it's like a graveyard for huge football clubs. I've been to so many clubs, with clubs I've been at, and you walk out at Wrexham, Chesterfield. You look at Notts County now. You're talking clubs that wouldn't look out of place. You took Wrexham to the Championship now. You get 25,000 there. They'd fill the stadium. It's a huge football club. But football doesn't respect anybody. It doesn't respect names. And for me, it's horrible because it's one of the, statistically, it's one of the toughest leagues in Europe to get out of.
Yeah.
And obviously, I know you were there, weren't you, with the Cowleys at Lincoln?
Were you? I didn't. Okay. We'll ask you that in a minute. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, and I just think it's a different mindset, Paul. I'll give you an example. When I first went in at Mansfield, I was unknown. I come from a little club called Eastwood, and fans didn't know anything about me. And to be fair, there was a little bit of a rebellion. It was like we didn't want you. We wanted an Alex Ferguson, somebody with 200 league management games behind it. And to be honest, I believe in speaking honestly with them. And it was just, I can remember on the fans forum when I told them where you are now as a club, and it was getting a realism from the supporters, and they still thought they were a big football league club. And I said, well, look, the statistics are that you haven't finished above 10th in the National League now for I think it was 3 or 4 seasons, Paul. Mm-hmm. But really, you're a mid-table non-league football club now. Now, if you can get your head around the psychology of that, I think then you can start to plan accordingly and start to look at putting the building blocks into what can get you, one, out of it, and then two, make sure you never go back and you keep progressing. Because it's, for a club like Notts, Chesterfield, Wrexham, you've got York City in the National League North, Hereford in the National League North. You're talking big football clubs, and you become a scalp for the smaller clubs. Yeah, it becomes a battle every week. And the thing is about now, non-leagues are becoming better and better and better with the coaching infrastructure, the clubs that are at it, the money that's being spent. You can spend 10 years wishing that you're going to get out there. But I think for me, it's, we've just talked about youth. It's while you are planning on getting out of these leagues, putting a good youth infrastructure in, putting all the foundations in to make sure that, when you do get out, and I'd like to think that a club of Notts' size will ultimately be out there soon, is that you've got all the strong foundations in place to move forward then.
Yeah. Whack, the Cowleys. Interesting because Martin Allen's a good mate of mine. And Martin told me when the Cowleys were at, was it Braintree? Braintree
yeah.
They were at.
Yeah.
And they were just starting out, and Martin said they will be the next big thing. He said they will be the next big thing in management. And of course, they got the opportunity at Lincoln, didn't they? Which went and they had that remarkable season. I mean, they've done remarkably well. What were they like? You got first-hand experience with us, sir.
Yeah, no, that was great. It was like you say, they was given a chance, because there was Concord, Braintree, never played football, was doing good things at Braintree, got the chance at Lincoln, and Lincoln's very similar in some ways to Notts. It's a club, the fan base at Lincoln was, I was amazed by it. It was incredible. I'm still living there now. So much I enjoy Lincoln. Yeah, still there now. So I really enjoy it. I'm still around. Family's all in Mansfield, so it's geographically works really well as well. So, but the club was right to sort of kick off. They came in that season and they weren't sure if it was going to be too big a job for them, but they worked their socks off, to be fair to them. They got a few things wrong. They got a lot right as well. But what they did, they sort of, and once they got on a bit of a roll and a few results, they sort of embraced the whole town. They did so much. I've never known anyone as them to work as hard off the pitch and off the training pitch. They was in schools. They was getting a buzz around the place. They made it a real sort of community feel for Lincoln as a whole, really, to be involved in the football club. Listen, you need results on the pitch as well to help maintain that. But it went from we had the first game I had with them. I went in there when they first went in, just to help them out, really, because I knew friends of friends. And the first game, I think we had, there was about 3,500 there, which was a decent crowd. It's bigger than they'd ever known. Then we did okay for a month or so. And then the crowd's around about 2.5. And you'd have they got the community going, they got the kids in the soccer schools and the coaching schools on a night time, and everyone would have a Forest shirt on, a Liverpool shirt on, Man United shirts on, and all that. Gradually, it changed over, and the more results we got and the more they embraced everyone together. I mean, they were sold out every week at Sinsel Bank by the end. And then it gradually changed. So we're talking about kids coming through as youth players to sustain the club on the pitch as well. These are sustaining the club off the pitch because they're coming. It gradually turned around after 6 months. And I know we had some amazing results and some great achievements there. But then the kids are coming to the half-term schools and that. And there's 89% Lincoln shirts. So I mean, it was just a small thing you could see such a change in everything. All of a sudden, all right, well, it's cool to support Lincoln again. You don't have to support Man United. And they did so much behind the scenes that way. And the club was great at that, and that was the best thing they did was, you know, was embrace the whole community, and everyone really got behind it. So then when it did go off and we got the results, everyone went with it, sort of thing, and it was great. And like Cox says, you've got to get the results on the pitch as well, obviously, but that goes with it. But they set such a buzz around the place. When we did get those results, it really catapulted them, and you know, they're reaping the rewards well now. You know, they're doing really well in Div 1 as well, and as an infrastructure in the club, and they've got a nice new training ground. And so Cowleys did great there. They did great, and I learned a lot from them as well. You know, I never see them more of a school teacher background. You know, they was big on the stats and all that, and I'd never looked at that side of things before. Really, it was just what you see on the pitch for me. But when I saw that side of things as well, yeah, I could see how it works hand in hand with it. And so Lincoln have got that, but it's really tough to get to because you don't have the time to then build your academies to come through in the next 1 year, 2 years. That's the bigger picture. There's got to be a plan for here and now. Then there has to be a plan for 5 years, and then there's got to be a plan for 10 years for me. You know, Lincoln was at that stage where they did the here and now. They signed some really good players for that level. They got the Cowleys, you know, there was exuberance in there, got the place buzzing, and we managed to get out of the league, which was great. Now they've gone on to the next phase now. They bring a lot of younger players through. They've not so much brought the academy through because they're still working on that, but they're buying, you know, and signing really young players that will stay with them for the future. And I think the fans are on board with that. You know, they like to see a young, vibrant team as well. And it's working well. And their next step will then hopefully be, for them anyway, that the kids and the setup they've got for the new training ground coming through in the next 3 or 4 years. So your 7 years really after you started you'll get some homegrown players for it as well there. And I think that was their plan as a club. Not so much the Cowleys. The Cowleys just wanted to achieve as much as they can on the pitch in that short. And they saw the best way to do it was to get everyone involved, and it worked a treat.
Which is very, very, you know, we all talk about minutes in legs and sports science, but a lot of the fundamental principles don't change. And it's exactly what Jimmy Cyril said when he came to Notts County in 1969. He was in a little hotel at West Bridgeford, and he said, I used to see people walk past my hotel and they were all wearing red and white. And he said, when I finish with this club, I want those fans, or some of them, to be wearing black and white. Very, 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 very similar principle. Anyway, but hey, let's talk to the man of education out in principal of the British school in Doha.
Who'd have thought that?
Well, I was trying to put it politely, really. I mean, the man who had a gold card at Ritz's
and made the most out of it.
Not just the one.
So you're talking. Hey, fair. We spoke about Notts and football providing a grounding for life. Yeah, and these two guys have gone on to make a successful career for themselves in football. And I know Paul does some Paul Cox does in teaching and education as well. But like, you've done well for yourself, haven't you? You've done well for yourself.
Yeah, things have worked all right. You know, I mean, they have. You know, I left Notts. Was it '95? Howard Kendall was manager when I left. I think that was 1995.
He could drink more than whack, couldn't he?
Yeah.
I did hear that.
I remember him pulling me into his office and sort of almost buttering me up a little bit, saying, "Listen, well done. You're one of the lucky ones. You know, someone's come in for you. Blah blah blah. You know, Mansfield are interested. You know, how do you fancy, you know, going over there, having a look?" Mansfield at the time were going for promotion in League Two. That's when Andy King was manager. So it was Andy King. Keith Alexander was the assistant manager. So I went over there, had a chat with Andy King. You know, and he's a larger than life sort of character. They offered me the same terms as Notts, and then I agreed, signed a 2.5-year contract there, and then summertime at Mansfield. And I did all right at Mansfield. It was okay. You know, I think I played 50 odd games, something like that. Andy King got sacked, and then Steve Parkin took over for a short spell. But the team itself, there's people like Aidan Boothroyd, Lee Barrowclough, Ian Barrowclough, Darren Ward played, Big Mark Sale, Ifeanora. So there were decent players, you know, at that time. And then it came to a point where I knew my contract was coming to an end. It wasn't going to get renewed. And it's one of those, sort of, like we were saying earlier, like crossroads moment in your career, in your life. What do you do? And I was very much, well, I could perhaps be a journeyman footballer and perhaps try and, scratch a living in the lower leagues, or perhaps do something else. And I sort of chose them to do something else. Went to uni in Bedford, did a 4-year degree down there, played non-league football with Bedford Town, which I thoroughly enjoyed my time down there, and then got a teaching qualification down in Bedford, and then really sort of got jobs down in Oakham, worked in Oakham for 7 years, then moved back up to Nottingham, played Hucknall Town, Arnold Town, Stamford Town, did a little bit of the non-league circuit, and then got jobs in Nottingham at Red Hill Academy, then Hall Park Academy in Eastwood, and then was getting promotions each time. And then a job came up then in Qatar as a vice principal of a school, big EYF, so year 3 all the way up to year 13, 2,000 kids. So come out here, and then within a year got promoted to principal. So I'm in my 2nd year here now as principal of this big international school in Doha. So yeah, it's all right. It's not bad. Sun shines every day. What more do you want? The World Cup in 2 years' time. So yeah.
I will be tapping up for tickets as well.
yeah. We're going to need a bigger apartment, I think, for all the lads to come out.
Yeah, you better rent your house out a bit, or whatever you live in, won't you? I mean, I've been to Qatar. I know the people in the Qatari League, and I went out there, as you know, for the athletics, and went to a Qatari League game, which was an experience. I went to El Wakra, and they gave me a VIP ticket, and literally they put you on these throne seats in the VIP sections of the ground. There's only about 300 people at the ground. Adeline Guadalajara was playing, but it was an incredible experience. And they bring out so you sat there in this throne seat, and they bring out from the St. Regis Doha 6-star hotel chain all this food and drink, and they just, and you're watching the game, and they'll come out, cheese pastries, whatever, and everything just comes. It's like unbelievable, really.
Oh, it is. It's proper. It is very much 5-star living. I mean, I'm a member of Doha Golf Club, and Andy Gray and Richard Keys are still doing the
yeah, the names are coming now, aren't they? The names are coming now.
So Andy Gray's always obviously at the golf club, and after a few bevies, went around the golf, not with Andy. And I was in the clubhouse and just chatting to my mates. I thought, I'll have a quick chat with Andy Gray. I said, "Oh, Andy, I said, me and you have got, I don't know, some connection." And he's like, "Oh yeah, looking at me, really? What's that then?" Well, back in the day, we both played for Notts County. I said, "Oh, right." So we had a little bit of a crack and had a beer and stuff. But yes, you often see him at the golf club. Plus a lot of the, with the beIN Sports, when Sam Allardyce would come out. Any of the sort of the pundits that would come for the matches of the weekend, they often then play golf, while they're out here and stuff. So yeah, it's a bit of a who's who sometimes.
Yeah, I think it'd be a decent World Cup, Paul. I think it'd be a decent World Cup because all the grounds, you can get to all the grounds on that metro system that's just opened in about half an hour. You can watch 3 games a day if you want. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, the metro. I mean, the infrastructure they've put in place is unbelievable. What they're doing. I mean, there's areas that are still sort of building site as it stands at the moment, but the stadiums and the new roads that they're building, as you say, the metro is 3 games a day. They say you'll be able to get in. And literally, I mean, one of the good things for us is they're saying that the schools will close for that period, so that the whole country can sort of embrace the World Cup experience. So looking forward to 4 weeks off and go and watch a bit of football.
Hey, open the dorms, get a few sleeping bags in the classrooms if the schools are closed. We'll all have it'll save us £500 a night, hotel bills.
Yeah, I'm not sure the owner will be too happy with
that. Before we wrap up, it's been brilliant, guys. Alan Judge, whack. Many Notts fans remember him very fondly. How's he doing?
He's been all right. Yeah, it's been all right. Oh, great lads. Loves a moan. He's a proper old school player. Loves a moan, but no, he's doing great. He's doing great. We've got a lot to. We've been okay this season. We're in a fantastic position in the league. We've not been as good as we'd have hoped in some games, but we found a way to win, which has been incredible in games. So we've got a good record. We're right up there. We've got a real tough 2 or 3 weeks now. A lot of football being played. Everyone's picking up these injuries at a minute because this was a funny old time, wasn't it, over pre-season. In sort of September and that. So it's a funny old time. We've got a lot of injuries. We've got some massive games coming up. So it's great. There's a lot of football being played. And especially on the news today, the fans are being let back in.
Yeah.
Although be it a little bit less. It's much needed. It's not the It's not even the same game without the fans for me. You know, I probably wouldn't have started it. I wouldn't have started it until the fans was allowed back in anyway. But, you know, it's great news that they can start coming back in soon. And, you know, even if it means we're getting booed a little bit, I don't even mind. They just get them back in.
Were you at Ipswich when Bart was there, Bilkowski, or did you just miss him?
Yeah.
Because
he came
very good at Notts.
2 months for Bart.
Yeah. I cannot believe.
Excellent goalie.
Yeah, I don't want to be critical, but I cannot believe that Little Notts County allowed big Ipswich Town to plead poverty to Notts, and we let Bart go to Ipswich on a free. Can you believe that?
Did you really?
Yeah.
Was Bart playing at Notts at the time?
Oh, yeah, every week.
Was he? I was trying to think, yeah.
I
he's
think basically
really
we wanted
goalie,
to save
really
a bit on his wages, right?
Right.
But clearly, you know, Ipswich are after him, yeah? And you got him on a free.
Don't make a lot of sense, does it? Although I know the chairman well at Ipswich, and I'm not surprised.
He's a good keeper, Bart. He's at Millwall now,
he's
isn't he?
excellent. He won. I think he won about 3 Player of the Years on the spin, Bart. To be fair, Ipswich just before I got there, and he was great. But yeah, like you say on that, all clubs need a good plan. Need a good plan and stick to that plan. And have good people at the club. Like we go back to what we said, you know. Especially a grounding for the kids coming through. If you've got good people around them and good people coming into the club, when people come into the club, they should know what the club's all about. And for me, Notts is, you know, it's a club of the people of Notts. And, you know, you want to see the young lads coming through. You want to see a team really having a go at it and that. And, you know, hopefully we can get back to that. It'd be great to see. I always look out for the results still.
Thank you. And let's wrap up with Coxie, because you have trodden a very well-worn former Notts County player route to Kettering, haven't you? Because Don Masson was manager there in the day. They had the likes of Dave Needham, Les Brad. Kettering was kind of one of those 2 stop-off points. Boston United was the other, where a lot of the Notts players would go to when they, because Kettering and Boston used to be 2 of the very, very top non-league clubs when there was no automatic promotion. So they've had some difficult times, Kettering, haven't they? So how's it going down there for you? Presumably, it's a hell of a lot easier commute, because I have no idea how you manage this. I've only been there once. Going to Barrow. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
To Barrow last year. We walked.
It was interesting.
Spent about a flipping half my life getting to and from bloody Holker Road from Nottingham. How you doing in 2 years? I do not know.
The people who've never been to Barrow don't realise just how far it was. You know, it was the best time for my marriage, to be honest, when I was down at Torquay in Barrow, because I never saw the wife.
Hey, Torquay's a snip compared to Barrow, to be honest with you. Torquay's straight. I mean, Barrow, Jesus. But anyway, Kettering. How's it going at Kettering?
Yeah, it's obviously, because when I dropped out of the league, it's one of the clubs I went to, and it was the biggest clubs in non-league football at that stage. You know, if we weren't playing in front of 2,500 down there at the old Rockingham Road, then Peter Manager, who was the chairman at the time, used to go bar me. But yeah, look, there's been a fall from grace, and it's just having to be rebuilt. That, you know, they've done a lot of hard work, but the big thing now is that the league that we're in, the York Cities, the Herefords, the Files, you're talking teams with $1 million+ budget now, and we're at that stage now where, you know, I've spoken to the chairman and he wants to put a 5-year plan together so we can get promoted. You know, I took over last year when there was rock bottom, and look, tough job. I think my thing now is I'm back enjoying it again. I sort of lost a little bit of the love of the game and probably, you know, probably didn't enjoy it as much as I should have done. But I had about 18 months off where I was out in the US, etc. I'm just loving it now. I'm looking at it. It's a challenge for us, massive challenge, but I'm actually enjoying being back in it again. And you know, even all the problem solving, all the things, you know, Wax said, you know, having the fans in and having fans having a go. Yeah, I'm kind of missing that now. You know, so it's yeah, I'm just loving being back involved in it, and I think that's a massive challenge for us. But, you know, something I'm really embracing at the minute.
Guys, I'll let you crack on, because it must be midnight now where Shills is in Doha. So still about 89 degrees, I'm bloody sure. But thank you ever so much indeed. James, thank you. Paul, thank you. And thanks to Shills for kind of putting all this together, because down to him with that chance remark about at Notts in the 90s. You were all in it together. Initiation rites, God knows what else. Running back from Stoke Bardolph. That's a fair old trek, by the way, as well. It's a fair old
you
run.
didn't believe that when he said that, did you?
Yeah, but,
Didn't believe that.
Well,
there ain't many
walk
buses,
back.
though. I don't think you can get on a bus from there. You could go to Burton Joyce and get the train back in if he was cute about it. But
Oh, let me tell you about Lack.
Yeah,
about Lack. You know,
he didn't tell you the story, did he?
Go on.
You know when he said he was doing the 3 bridges? He'd have been that little calf. He'd have come back with brown sauce in his mouth. He'd have been an egg and sausage butty, wouldn't he? Then on his top. That have been it one tip.
Well, I did miss a little bit out on the story back from Stoke Bardolph, Shields, didn't I?
Yeah. Like hitchhiking. When we used to run back, the losing team would have to run back. I think Wack mentioned it earlier. But there was one time where Wack must have hitchhiked. He got a lift. He just threw in the lift and jumped in the back of some wagon or something.
And I was still last.
Yeah.
Well, one of them I did it, and one of the times I did it, I'd hitched the lift for most of it, and I got back a bit further, and I still was nowhere. Couldn't even see the lads in the distance, like. So they only dropped me so far. And there was a pub on the corner at the time. I can't remember. It was about 80 degrees. I was parched, and it was me and Jimmy Moore. Can you remember Jimmy Moore?
Yeah.
And there was me and him. He was fatter and lazier than me, Jimmy. So we've got
a Gascoigne lookalike, wasn't he?
Yeah, that was
the starting
it,
gate
Jimmy.
near the racecourse.
That was it.
I knew it'd be the starting gate. I knew it'd be the starting gate.
So I was parched. I said to Jim, listen, if I don't get a drink now, because it's 5 miles or so, probably even more. And we didn't have any drinks or anything at that point. It's not like there was hydrating. You just get yourselves back. So we'd walked half the way, had a lift for about a mile, which was still like half an hour behind the lads. Went in the starting gate just to get a water. Explained to the lad who I was, not who I was, but said, look, we're coming back. Yeah, exactly. We wouldn't have known it. But I had his kit on. I said, look, just need a quick drink, mate. So messing about, I meant a water. So messing about, he poured me half a pint of lager. So I'm there, and this is on my life. As me and Jimmy Moore are messing about, well, we might not have been messing because that lager looked good as well. We're just taking the head off the lager. Mick Walker and Russ Slade came in through the door. They'd seen us go in the pub, and they went mental. Mental. That was it. They slaughtered us, and I think I ran my socks off. There was a place we called it Hamburger Inn in the end because it was like that. Yeah. And I must have had to run it every day for about the next 2 weeks. It was horrendous. So I learned a harsh lesson. Never get caught.
Hey, great story to finish with, guys. Loved every minute of it. Thank you ever so much. And from Doha to Portman Road to Rockingham Road, we wish you all the very best. Thank you, guys.
Dream. Good luck, everyone.
Cheers, Paul.